Welcome to the Purple Positivity Podcast for March the 16th, 2018. I am your host, the amazingly adorable Rebecca Thistle, podcasting to you live-ish from my kitchen table in my apartment, which I call Jeffrey Thistlework. It's really weird calling it my kitchen table because usually when I think about the kitchen, there's like tile on the floor and there's not tile where my kitchen table is. So I think of it kind of as a dining room, but I've always called it my kitchen table, and it should be a dining room table, but it's not. And so that's why here recently I've been saying kitchen/dining room. So random beginning to this show. Even more random is this. I have made a discovery that was actually suggested that I make about 5-6 years ago. And finally I made it. And that is chocolate flavored vodka and Dr. Pepper. Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh Lord, I got right schnickered. I remember when I was like in I think it was middle school, or maybe no, I was probably in 9th or 10th grade, because I was always a very awkward person. I got bored one day and I looked up. I had a thesaurus, like you do when you're 14 years old. I looked up the entry in the thesaurus for intoxication or inebriation or something like that. Drunk. And there's all these synonyms. And I think my favorite synonym for drunk is spifflicated. I love that. So I got spifflicated last night. And someone was very patiently amused by that and then got off the phone with me and wouldn't answer again, which makes me feel stupid looking through the conversation now, going, oh my god, look at all these stupid texts that I sent. So that was fun. There's one that's just like a bunch of random letters and numbers, and I'm like, when did I send that? Why did I send that? What? That's weird. So, this is going to be a really interesting show. Not because I'm hungover per se. I still feel a little buzzed. So, I guess I'm hungover, but I'm not. I did drink a lot of water, and somewhere in the middle of the night, I ordered pizza. So, I feel pretty good, actually. So let's do this. It's going to be fun. So I decided this morning that the title of this show is going to be How to Save Civilization. So there are two things that I feel I have to preface this show with. The first being, number one, I'm not trying to get preachy or religious about this subject. I am going to be talking about St. Patrick. And I'm going to try and keep it as, as factual as I can make it. Because, with any saint, you're kind of like, you got to rely on what the church says and stuff like that. But I'm going to try and keep it as factual as I possibly can. And not be like, oh, look how great God is, sort of thing. But, and then the second thing is that all my information on St. Patrick that I will be divulging in this show comes specifically from this book called How the Irish Saved Civilization by Thomas Cahill. I'm an English major. I have to cite my sources. That's just how it is. Okay? So, you ready? Let's do this. St. Patrick. St. Patrick was born in Britain, if I'm not mistaken. Sometime after Christianity became legal in the Roman Empire. So his mom was a Christian, But his dad, funnily enough, was a tax collector. So his dad probably still worshipped the Roman gods. I don't remember Cahill saying anything about his dad and his theology. But he was a tax collector. That's what we do know. And, that's like the tax collectors, God bless them, get demonized in scriptural interpretation. Oh, the tax collector and Zacchaeus and this, that, and the other. And yeah, tax collectors kind of had to be dicks. But it wasn't always because they deep down were dicks. It was because they had to collect the taxes. And so if they go around the neighborhood and they get say 80% of the homes in said neighborhood to pay up their taxes, the other 20% that they're short, they have to pay out of their own pocket. So, one way or another, the empire got paid. And so the tax collectors were kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of thing, because nobody wants to pay their taxes. But if they don't pay their taxes, then they get it taken out of their hide. Sometimes literally. So anyways, that's Patrick's parents. He wasn't actually born Patrick or Patricius or anything like that. That was actually given to him later. But I can't remember what his actual name was. So just for the sake of everybody's sanity, we're going to continue to call him Patrick. So when Patrick was about 15 or 16 years old, he was kidnapped and sold into slavery in Ireland. The Roman Empire never made it to Ireland because they didn't think it was worth their time. Like, they had a hard enough time getting into England. And after that, they were just like, screw it. Pretty much. It rains too much. We don't want to, I don't know. So Patrick gets sold into slavery in Ireland when he's a teenager. And slavery at any point in history has never been good. So he was beaten and he was starved and he was often forced to stand watch over the herds of sheep and stuff for hours, if not days on end, by himself, alone, hungry, bruised, and naked in Ireland. So it's not necessarily a really great existence. But what legend has is that he started praying when he was in the fields. And after about 7 years, he was out in the fields praying, and God talked back and said, "Hey, your ship is waiting." And he went, "Hey, the nearest port is 200 miles away." And God said, "Well, you better get walking." So he just walked off. And 200 miles later came to the port, and funny series of events, eventually got onto a ship and made it back home, where he then spent his life, the next 20 or so years of his life, studying Christianity and worshiping God and doing that whole thing. But about 20 years later, God came a-talking to him again and said, "Hey, go back to Ireland and teach them about Christianity." And Patrick said, "What?" And go back to Ireland, teach them about Christianity. He went, "Okay." And so he got ordained as a priest. I think it took about 6 years for him to go through that, if I remember the text right. And he went back to Ireland and converted them to Christianity. They didn't take it up necessarily like with instant gusto, but they took it up more peacefully than most non-Roman places did, historically speaking. Cahill calls it like one of the most, if not the most, bloodless conversion to Christianity in all of history. So, this is why this is important. This is why we're going to get into the saving of the civilization. This is probably going to spoil like the whole awesomeness of the plot to how the Irish saved civilization. Because Patrick went to Ireland to convert them to Christianity, part of that meant he had to ordain more priests. And ordaining more priests meant that he had to teach them how to read and write so that they could read the scriptures to, and do homilies and all that stuff. So part of learning how to read and write, particularly in Latin and Greek at the time, was you copied other texts. Like you learned to read those texts and then you copied them down to practice and stuff like that. And the Irish who started learning, they started reading these texts and copying them, and they went, wow, stories, Irish love a good story, right? And so, like, they took it up, like, as they couldn't get enough of these books, and they went, and this is pre-printing press, of course. And so they take up this charge of copying down all these books from the Roman Empire. Meanwhile, on the main European continent, the Roman Empire is falling. Visigoths and barbarians and all that are just sacking the shit out of the Roman Empire, and buildings are being burnt and books are being lost, and and it's just going to hell in a handbasket. But meanwhile, you've got these monks in Ireland copying down these books because they love the stories. After about 100 years, all the craziness sort of dies down a little bit on the main continent, and the Irish are getting a little antsy. They're like, well, everybody in Ireland I can't do an Irish accent, so this is less entertaining than it could be if I did. The Irish are sitting in Ireland. Well, everybody here is Christian, so there's no fun in converting, preaching to the converted. Let's go and convert other people. And so they go back to mainland Europe, and they bring with them their books. And these books that they had copied and preserved, eventually, they kind of get buried during, the Middle Ages, but eventually they come back to the surface, and especially with the invention of the printing press, help to begin the Renaissance, which then begins the Protestant Reformation, which then begins the Age of Enlightenment, which then begins the Industrial Revolution, which eventually leads to where we are today. And there you go. That's how the Irish saved civilization. So, here's the point I want to make about that. This is what I mean about how to save civilization. I was thinking about Patrick and what he went through.